少し付き合ってもらうぞ。またお前か。
先に言っとくが、俺はパーフェクトだぜ。
What's good, everybody? It's EC LaForce, and I'm back with another 4 fighting game players. I don't really know what to call these. I didn't want to slap a year on this or future videos because I think that all these games I talk about really stand the test of time. There will always be people playing these games and you'll find matches. Anyway, I plan to make this into a series where I kind of shine some light on fighting game franchises and what they're all about, and try to get more people interested in them. In this case, Guilty Gear does a lot of the legwork for me because the game is gorgeous. Everyone recognizes how awesome this game looks, but are often intimidated by the systems and overall concepts of the game. Or at least what they always hear about it. So with this video, I hope to rein in some of your expectations of it and show you how you can pick up this game and start playing. I'll be covering the overarching concepts of Guilty Gear as a whole, so that no matter which game you start with, you'll have an understanding that you can apply to any of them. What's important to understand is that in comparison to a game like Melty Blood, the previous game that I covered on this channel, where system understanding holds more value than specific character understanding generally, Guilty Gear follows kind of the opposite trend of that, where character familiarity and situational understanding is what carries you further to the top. Not understanding the systems available to you, however, is equally crippling, as you will need a strong grasp of your defensive and offensive options to handle many of the situational events that might occur in a match. For example, you might be fighting Slayer and begin to question why everything he does feels like an invincible dragon punch, or if there's any way to stop his oppression at close range, when in reality it comes down to an understanding of his toolkit and the specific actions he's taking to enforce the game plan that he's running on you. This is where the actual difficulty in Guilty Gear lies. It has nothing to do with tight combos, tricky setups, complicated characters, whatever. It's the ability to understand every option at your disposal for any given situation. It's genuinely hard to remember every option you have on defense while you are playing that defense in a match. Many things in Guilty Gear come at you too fast to recognize in the moment, and sometimes you'll just have to pick an option on the fly. It comes down to practice and matchup experience to familiarize yourself with these situations. The less you have to actively process and think about on the fly, the better. The game already demands a lot from you if you're trying to play reactive to the opponent. With that being said, let's jump into the characters of Ixard and Plus R. I won't cover how the characters function in Strive because as of right now, we genuinely have no idea, but I would expect them to at least play somewhat similar. I'll be going a bit more in depth than usual because the enjoyment you get from your character is generally what will motivate you through all of your trials and tribulations. Let me say that again. Picking a character that you really like is super important, and it'll take you through all of the ups and downs that you have with the game. Soul, poster boy, pseudo Shoto of the game. Soul will teach you everything you need to know about Guilty Gear, but with some spice. You have a simple game plan of frame trap and tick throw to open people up on offense, and he has the ability to make conversions off any touch provided he has meter for it. You have the ability to reset pressure like most characters do utilizing Roman cancel, but also you can use this to approach in awkward situations. You have a traditional Dragon Punch alongside some other specials that enable you to play a bit more wild than most characters. Lots of Soul specials end up moving him in a direction, and since movement is one of the harder parts to grasp about Guilty Gear, this is pretty beneficial for new players. Just don't get too overzealous with it. Kai. If Soul is Taco Bell Diablo sauce, Kai is probably mild. Nothing wrong with that, just different tastes for different people. Kai has the uncanny ability to control space with his great normals and fireballs. In reality, he's one of the best characters if you want to learn Guilty Gear at a fundamental level, like mashing stun dipper in a block string. You use your oppressive reach and
attack vectors
to keep the opponent at bay, and when you score a knockdown, you're able to run some pretty impressive Oki. Kai is all about dictating the pace of the match from his comfort zone and shutting the opponent down anytime they try to break free. Mei, you know man, sometimes you just gotta hit some buttons. Sometimes you just gotta do dolphin twice in a row, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes you gotta jump back with slash, and then jump forward with slash, air dash with slash. If you just want to jump around and hit shit, you should play Mei. Similar to Soul, Mei is really great for new players and enables you to play like a complete psychopath. She has depth that allows you to grow exponentially with the character in terms of her Oki and pressure routes, but also lets you just swing on people. She has a command grab to complement her irritating offense and excels at frustrating the opponent into forced decisions that might just be their ass. Sin. Sin teaches you a lot of the core elements of Guilty Gear with some unique character-specific flair. He has good normals that occupy spaces that he really wants to keep the opponent at, but what really shines about the character is his ability to cancel specials into other specials at the cost of his calorie meter. Every time you use a special move or cancel these specials into one another, this meter slowly depletes until he either gets hungry or you refill it by eating. This allows for simple and strong confirms from stray hits and really utilizes the space control that's found in his normals. Many of his specials complement this factor of his game plan and can make certain matches hell for the opponent. Sin is a great choice if you like talking about how honest your character is. Cliff. New to Plus R, Cliff offers a unique playstyle accompanied by some easy confirms and huge normals. Cliff has a very slow, floaty jump, but this allows him to set up instant overhead situations that'll leave the opponent dazed, confused, and maybe even stunned. Cliff has select normals and specials that really drive the stun up and can quickly turn a game on its heels with strong reads and positioning. Not only that, but he talks shit and then throws it at you. You gotta give it up. That's actually ridiculous. That's so sick. Oh my, Faust. An oddball character that actually plays a really simple game, despite the uncertainty in some of his specials and supers. Ultimately, you want to press slash and cancel that into an item toss. What the item is will dictate how neutral and offense change for that moment in gameplay. You stop the opponent's air approach with 6P, jump H, and 5K, while keeping the ground covered with your items, far slash, and crouching heavy slash. He has some interesting properties to certain moves that allow him to alter his air momentum in a variety of ways, and can run an effective, if awkward, offense. Faust is for you if you like interesting, dynamic interactions and wearing the opponent down with your long reach and weird situations. Anji, a unique character that has multiple command normals for almost every button, all with their own unique function. One of the defining characteristics of Anji is their guard points, which can be found in all of his most important moves, one of which being the infamous Fujin, that oftentimes serves as a coverall answer that just seems to work. Fujin itself has multiple follow-ups to make the counteraction taken against it scary, and forces the opponent to stay on their toes even after blocking it. The other defining characteristic is his Butterfly Oki, which forces the opponent to block and take Anji's mix-up after almost any knockdown. This is complemented by his ability to frame trap from anything due to his enormous Gatling windows that extend through even the recovery of his normals. If you like forcing the opponent's adaptation and directly answering it, Anji's for you. Leo. Something, monkey, 5 heavy slash, gorilla, my reads, I'm nice. You get the idea. Leo gets the reputation of just rolling people, and that mostly holds true. It's on the opponent of Leo to be ready to deal with him. Leo forces his offense very well and becomes a huge annoyance once he gets in. He smothers people with many situations that leave him either plus on block or very slightly minus on block where he can RPS you. A designated Rekka character that has a fireball that can be used for Oki as well as an awkward approach tool. If you like making reads and dealing big damage, Leo's your guy. Order Soul. The great-grandfather to Leo, but only in reputation. Order Soul has some terrifying normals and specials that can crush the opponent under him and allow him to brute force his way into where he wants. Unique to Order Soul is his charge gauge that can manually be leveled up with an input or by canceling into a compact charge after his specials. The gauge powers up all of his special moves, making what would normally be a stray hit or a reversal DP into a full combo starter, or a fireball into a plus 37 hell move. He can go into his charge input from normals and make himself plus as well, so this coupled with his powered up specials set up scary situations on offense. Slayer. Don't let his appearance fool you, Slayer is also a gorilla. A bit unorthodox at first, Slayer uses his strange movement options to evade and decimate the opponents off singular decisions. Many of his specials and even certain normals alter his movement in some way. and through the use of jump canceling his backdash, he can make many of his specials feel invincible. Slayer is all about callouts and direct answers to problems, and in this regard it means that many of his options are really committal, so if you make the wrong read, it might end poorly for you. Ino. Ino is a character that has a commanding control over the horizontal axis, and this is shown in her special moves as well as her hover dash. She truly starts to shine when she gets a knockdown, and it allows her to enforce her terrifying mix-up game. She boasts some really powerful super moves as well, that either leave her completely safe or even plus on block. Ino utilizes her note to get in, and once she gets in, she forces the opponent to guess. If you block the initial mix-up, she will have to take some kind of risk to re-engage. So as the Ino player, it's important to rotate through your options, and as the opponent, it's up to you to be prepared for those options that she's going to take. Milia. Following the trend of knockdown, Milia is and forever will be the queen of set play. Your game plan is to knock your opponent down and don't let them get back up. The effectiveness of this is dependent game to game, as the system in Rev 2 gives you more options to deal with her oppression, but in the end the opponent will still have to guess against Milia. She boasts some extreme mobility with many ways for her to alter her aerial trajectory. You must use these movement options to beat your opponent in neutral and secure the knockdown. Getting the knockdown with Milia while doing good damage got a bit more difficult in Rev 2, as you must have pin or some specific bad move setup. Milia must have combo routes ready for these situations, otherwise she will not be able to run her game. Getting put back at neutral isn't necessarily what Milia wants, as generally she has one of the weakest defenses in the game, so she'll really suffer if she gets caught. Chip, another glass cannon archetype who has an answer for everything. Chip excels at many things and has a tool for almost every situation with a relatively high execution barrier. He has many of Milia's traits in that he has very low HP while having very high mobility and performs really well when the opponent's knocked down. The key difference is the versatility in Chip's toolset. He has numerous ways to extend pressure, tricky teleports, a DP, and some really helpless mix-up situations. Chip needs to use everything in his arsenal to avoid getting hit, because when he gets touched, it could very well be the end of him. Chip is one of the most fun characters in all of fighting games, until you get hit. Bridget. Bridget is a special case of being a keep-away character, but not necessarily a zoner. This is due to the fact that he has crazy mobility that goes with his main gimmick of the yo-yo, which replaces the heavy slash button. You place the yo-yo on screen and you can activate a number of specials to that position that either allow Bridget to cover himself or maneuver around the opponent. This movement can also be used aggressively to keep up a steady pace of offense, and even has really high potential for lockdown situations if the opponent puts themselves in a bad position. Bridget forces the opponent to play chase, and when he's on the move, it's hard to keep up. Johnny. Johnny uses his massive normals to oppress the opponent with his unique ability to cancel them quickly and then swing again. Johnny possesses some of the scariest pressure in the game, and when he levels up his Mistfinder attack with his coins, he has the uncanny ability to make high damage confirms off stray hits. With the introduction of Zweihander and Igzard, Johnny now has numerous ways to reset pressure alongside his already powerful Mistfinder cancel, in addition to getting easier knockdown situations. Johnny has trouble getting around the screen, but this is because his normals and specials are so dominant on the ground that he makes up for the space that he would otherwise occupy with movement. Johnny boasts a high execution barrier, but your reward, especially in Rev 2, is unparalleled. Venom, a character that can play well anywhere on the screen. Venom uses his pool balls to take up space at a distance and enforces pressure and Oki game up close. Many people are overwhelmed by the amount of options that you have with ball placement, but in reality there are just a couple of different formations or sets that you really need to know. Venom is very freeform and open-ended with what you can do with him, and allows for a lot of expression in how you run your game. Venom is a character that does require some situational understanding, as well as being able to consistently crouch confirm in Rev 2, but you're rewarded with an incredibly safe and effective character. Eddie. Zato 1. The puppet character of Guilty Gear. Zato 1 uses negative edge to control his puppet, which means Zato will perform an attack with the button press, and the puppet will perform an attack with the button release. This makes him really awkward to use at first, as you have to readjust your muscle memory for this character specifically. Zato is another open-ended character for how you play them. Your manipulation of the puppet and use of them in neutral is crucial to the success of the character. If played properly, Zato gains very strong control over the neutral with his puppet, and terrifying pressure when he makes the opponent block, with the ability to make them guess multiple times in a pressure cycle without spending any meter. Potemkin. Speaking of dedicated characters, this is the foundational grappler of Guilty Gear. He lacks the ability to run on the ground or air dash, so he really can't catch the opponent outright. He has to utilize his special moves to assist him in getting in. Once he gets in, he has to make strong reads to capitalize on the opponent's reaction. Ultimately, he wants to condition the opponent to stay on the ground so he can command grab them, as this is the bulk of where his damage comes from outside of getting big counter hits on certain normals. You know what to expect with this archetype, but if you want to put yourself through it and feel the rush of a pot buster, Potemkin is the character you want to play. Axel. Axel is a keep-away character that wants to take up screen space with his big normals. He's really good at hitting weird angles in the sky as well as annoying spots on the ground. His specials complement this and even has some gimmicky setups to irritate the opponent further. While he might not be the most effective at what he does, he definitely succeeds at being the most frustrating. Despite this, he is thoroughly honest in what he really wants to do and generally has a hard time once the opponent starts to see where they have options available. Regardless, if you like to bully people and frustrate the opponent at a distance, Axel's your guy. Justice. A unique negative edge zoner. Justice lacks the ability to traverse the screen like most characters in Guilty Gear due to not having a run or air dash, kind of like Potemkin. But approaching isn't necessarily what Justice does best. Justice creates situations with her fireballs that make the opponent have to take risks to get in, and this is accented by her impressive reach and combo enders that send the opponent full screen. Even as an unorthodox zoner, Justice has tools to crack the opponent on offense and make their life hell. If you like keeping the opponent at full screen, smacking them with big normals, or mechs, Justice will give you what you want. Jam. What Jam lacks in range, she makes up for in sheer power and terrifying speed. Jam does really well once she gets in, but generally has to brute force her way into that position. Her jump buttons are extremely hard to deal with, and coupling this with some speedy moves on the ground will make the opponent hesitate on hitting any buttons. Once she scores a knockdown, it gives the opportunity for Jam to power up her special that can be leveled up to 3 times. Jam can overwhelm the opponent once she gets in range to make them block, and will constantly force the opponent to roll the dice on her if they want to escape. However, if they make the wrong choice, Jam can just take them out of the game. Raven. Alright, this is Baby's first set play. Raven runs an incredibly simple and effective game. They have easy confirms that lead into knockdown, and then they get to run their Oki. Rinse and repeat. They have a projectile as well as some big buttons and specials to help them along when in neutral, alongside an excitement meter that changes the properties of certain moves and supers. Also, he has a unique air dash that ultimately allows him to make the opponent guess if they don't snipe it out. Play Raven if you like making people block and feel helpless on a knockdown. Testament. A crime against God. War criminal. Call him what you want. It's Testament. Get knocked down into plus 1 million and make the opponent guess over and over again. Render their defensive options useless and force hell on their life. When they finally get out, that's when the real fun starts. They have to navigate your maze of traps and these horrifying screen tools. Use Force Break Skull to make the opponent cry in horror as the realization that they get cursed even on block, and they must deal with more screen control. Your normals will beat them into submission as every attempt at any approach is firmly halted by the unbiased sight. This character's fair though. Zappa. Alright, this is a real horror character that is haunted by a miasma of ghosts and ghouls. Zappa requires specific knowledge of his pseudo-RNG summons and must adapt his neutral and offensive game plan accordingly. The ghost summon allows Zappa to cover numerous angles and ranges with an increased reach and passive curse when he lands certain attacks. The dog accelerates Zappa's offensive ability to get a situational infinite as well as some really hard to deal with block strings, alongside forcing the opponent to make reads during their offense on you. The sword is probably the most threatening summon because it allows full screen unseeable mix-ups into knockdown and solid damage. And when it all comes to an end, Roa seals the deal with massive destructive hitboxes that almost guarantee a win. Ramlethal, a technical character that follows different rules for her gatherings than the rest of the cast. She can go into multiple different strings from her normals like a Mortal Kombat or Tekken character that can result in high-low situations in certain circumstances. In addition, she has the ability to summon her sword to the opponent, and therefore changing her actual attacks based on whether or not she has the swords. They can be used in neutral, but you'll see them used most effectively once she gets the opponent in the corner and can start her pressure/Oki game. It takes a good eye and experience to see the gaps in her pressure to start fighting out, and if you don't know those spots, Ramlethal just mauls you. Elfelt. The most offensive, as in insulting, character to most people in Ixard. She has 2 different stances that both serve their respective roles. Insane normals, Pineberry being what it is, and just overall very abusive as a character. Her biggest shortcoming is no dedicated anti-air button, but if you have the right positioning, then a well-timed close slash will cover you for that. Elfelt helps newer players in neutral by giving them strong buttons to hit, but has the potential to exponentially grow with the player once they become better at the game, giving them things like unique high combo damage routes and unblockable setups. Abba. Abba swings on you really hard in one form and doesn't do much in the other. See, she has 2 forms. You start in her base form where she is probably the worst character in the game. She really struggles to get anything going until you pop a blood pack or get a key grab. Then she becomes really terrifying with huge damage, big normals, and absurd speed. She cranks guard bar like crazy, and when you end up getting counter hit, you just explode. The downside is you lose HP when you are attacking in this form, and in order to get that health back, you either need to manually exit the form or land another key grab. If the meter depletes entirely, then you exit that form with a super long recovery animation that will be punished severely. If you like high risk and high reward, Abba will work well for you. Heiyun, a power hitter with a unique fireball that they control with directional inputs. Heiyun has some impressive buttons that can lead into big damage from afar, but they really shine once they are able to put the opponent between them and the fireball, allowing them to force a strike-throw mix-up game alongside some overheads to use as a check, and any one of the hits will lead into huge damage. All around, a pretty simple character that lets you run a fun pressure game once you get the chance and rewards you with massive damage. Answer. Oddball character that can summon glyphs to move between. This allows for extended pressure in the air, but can be detrimental because there's setup required in order to get any momentum going. They have a small projectile that can be reactivated as a summon. Once his glyphs are set, Answer will be spending most of his time in the air. It's hard for him to secure a knockdown in certain scenarios, so he does well at chasing people after they tech with his jump D and air throw. He also has a command grab. He's a bit unorthodox, but if you want to play an off-the-wall character, then by all means. Baiken. Baiken likes to control space with her tatami and not block, as she has ways to cancel her block stun into a counterattack, which with some follow-ups can lead into big counter hit damage. Baiken forces the opponent to play offense differently against her, and for good reason, because if she is successful at countering you, then you're in for a world of hurt, and the following mix-up could be your last. She takes a bit of work practicing some of her techniques, but overall she's very rewarding as a character. Dizzy. Dizzy is all about taking up screen space with her summons and using those same summons to force the opponent to block on their wake up. She is highly mobile with 2 air dashes and on knockdown creates really scary setups that are difficult to block correctly. Despite the size of her normals, she ends up having relatively quick attacks for how big they are, best examples being 2D and Ice Spike. That being said, she isn't incredible at close range, as she is still outclassed by faster normals and better scramble tools. Play Dizzy if you want high mobility and presence all over the screen. Robokai. Robokai has some really impressive specials, but this is because they all cost meter. His own unique meter, not the tension gauge. He has the ability to charge it on his own without any action needed other than standing in the right spot. His entire game plan revolves around this and managing his other gauge unique to him, the heat gauge. This powers up many of his moves when he's hot, but you have to be careful to not overheat, as it will knock you down and put you in recovery. Despite this, he is incredibly fun to play and offers even more management to the already hectic systems of Guilty Gear. If you like managing resources and cashing out big, play Robokai. Jacko, a minigame character. She sets up her village and makes you interact with it. She has tools to help her in regards to her normals, but the reality is that she wants to make you deal with her houses. If the opponent doesn't take care of them in a timely manner, then Jacko puts them in a really tough situation once the minions start up. This is especially effective against people that can't bust out with a DP, and you can just run your village all over them. Extremely weird character that doesn't follow the mold of anyone else in the game. Bedman. Finally, we have Bedman to round out the cast. They have a unique system where they can reactivate a special move that they have already performed, acting as a set special on the screen. Bedman's movement is also unique, as they have an 8-way dash similar to a Marvel character. This really ties into the notion that the character is supposed to play an offensive game that catches the opponent off guard. If you want to play a weirdo character that has a full bag of tricks with strange normals, then Bedman is for you. Whew. Alright, now that we're done with that, let's talk about some systems in the game, or rather, how they affect the game. First off, Guilty Gear has 5 different attack buttons: punch, kick, slash, heavy slash, and dust. All of these are pretty self-explanatory with the exception of dust, which when performed standing is usually a universal overhead, and when performed crouching is typically some form of sweep that knocks the opponent down. The game operates on a chain system that lets you go between the attack buttons without delay, canceling the previous normal that you were doing on hit or block. What moves can chain into and out of is character specific, so be sure to experiment with that. You have a tension gauge shared among the cast that generally increases with all types of aggressive actions. You have a risk gauge that builds up the more attacks that you block, and when it's high enough, it will turn the next hit into a counter hit. You also have a burst, which we'll talk about later. Let's get into the meat of it. Out the gate, understand your movement options. Most characters have an air dash, double jump, super jump, and a run. Becoming familiar with all of your movement options is extremely important, because if you continue to take the same approach over and over again, the punishment can be severe. See how momentum interacts with all of the options available to you, how to navigate attack ranges and press advantage once something is whiffed, how you can bait anti-airs, and how you consistently anti-air yourself. Probably one of the hardest things to grasp in an anime game when you first touch it is the movement and what it is actually used for. Spending time in training mode and in matches just becoming accustomed to the trajectory of your jump arcs and air dashes first and foremost, because although there are many more movement options than in a standard 2D fighting game, there are just as many answers for those options as well. Guilty Gear is all about situational interaction between the characters, so for the most common situation, let's look at neutral. If you played 2D fighting games before, then you probably already understand concepts of poking, whiff punishing, etc. This isn't different from those games, and you can still apply those concepts. Most guides on Guilty Gear Neutral will break it down in the following ways. Poking and preemptive action will beat dash attempts with closer range buttons. Closer range buttons and dashing in will beat waiting to whiff punish or anti-air, and whiff punishing will beat poking and preemptive action. In addition, at every point during these moments in a match, it's important to watch for anti-air situations. You have to be able to take someone out of the sky when the opportunity presents itself. Learn and practice your anti-airs. Again, most 2D fighting games will follow this structure of neutral, and it's not really exclusive to Guilty Gear, but it is important to understand these concepts when you're trying to apply them in a match. So let's look at another example. Sol is putting the pressure on Kai. His offense feels so oppressive, and Kai can't seem to find a way out. This is where Guilty Gear can set itself apart on offense and on defense. Sol will use a mix of options to rotate between his pressure. One of the cornerstones is the Roman cancel. We'll use an example from Rev 2 for this demonstration. If the opponent is in hit or block stun, the cancel will be red, and it requires half a bar of meter. If the opponent is not in hit or block stun, then the cancel will be yellow and it requires a quarter of his meter. Sol can use a variety of different moves to cancel and enforce his offense, among other things like stagger pressure leading into frame traps or throw, and jump cancelable normals to reset his pressure. So what will Kai do in this situation? Well, if he keeps getting stagger pressured and can't get Sol off of him, he can utilize Flawless Defense by holding two buttons that aren't dust or heavy slash while blocking. It spins your meter, but it's an effective way to push the opponent out when they're in your face. Another option that can be applied a bit more aggressively is instant blocking by tapping block at the correct time of an attack. This lowers the frame advantage and pushback of a move, making otherwise safe moves and gaps punishable, or at least in your favor. Additionally, if you feel overwhelmed and can't find a way out, then dead angle attacks might be your best option, functioning as a get-off-me tool at the cost of 50% meter by pressing forward and two buttons during block stun. It should be noted that there are numerous side effects to these techniques that I'm not going to dig into but are vital to playing the game, such as that Flawless Defense completely halts your forward momentum and lets you block instantly out of a run, and it'll let you block most grounded attacks from the air in addition to negating chip damage, and that things like dead angle can be baited and punished if the opponent has a read on you. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, one of the hardest things about Guilty Gear for newcomers is that there are so many options available to you at any given time. I'm sure even from what I've just said now, it's hard to keep track of. It's genuinely hard to remember every defensive option you have while you're being pressured, and it can make situations overwhelming. Like, okay, Jam just keeps air dashing back at you all day, and really you could do so much if you had it in your memory. 6P, 5K, 2 heavy slash, Faultless Defense, instant block, even
Air throw.
I think air throw, and the throw of Guilty Gear in general, is extremely important to the game. It should be mentioned now, throw in Guilty Gear is performed by pressing forward or backward with heavy slash, and this applies to the air as well. This means that if you are not in range, then a heavy slash will just come out as a result. The throws in Guilty Gear are effectively zero frame startup, meaning that they will beat media attempts if you're in range. This can even create a mind game that really encourages players to attempt throw and wake up, but carries severe risk if it's baited. Air throw in particular is a universal anti-air tool that is extremely strong no matter what character you play. Being able to perform reactionary and accurate air throws is a skill that is recognized among many top-level Guilty Gear players, and will be used in countless situations. I think it's a misconception from newer players that the air throw is a flex rather than a necessary tool. Air throw is something that must be trained into your memory, like being able to do an anti-air DP in Street Fighter, as certain moves and techniques will have no other concrete answer other than to air throw. However, there is one variant of the air throw that is 100% a flex. Let's take this time to look back at Burst. Burst is Guilty Gear's dedicated panic button, performed by pressing dust and heavy slash. It completely stops any combos, pressure, you get the idea, but it's on a long cooldown, and sometimes they'll be absent for most of the round depending on when the burst was used last. They are completely invincible, all except to air throw. Normally you can just block a burst if you're expecting it and punish or have a burst safe combo, but sometimes sending a message is worth more than the combo damage. I figured, I'm gonna get his burst right here by the way. Yeah! Yeah! Anyway, here's a recap of how to use some tools in the game as well as some things that you might not hear about otherwise. Use Flawless Defense to create space and even whiff punish opportunities. It's also essential if you want to have a safe, grounded approach in neutral. Use Instant Block to create gaps in pressure that might even allow guaranteed retaliation. Throw is very strong because it's so fast, so be sure to layer your offense so that there isn't a gap that can be exploited by throw all the time. In many cases, it's better to go for a knockdown rather than damage. Cashing out on damage when they're at full HP generally isn't worth it, especially if you don't get knocked down. Instead, use knockdowns to put yourself in favorable situations to score even more damage, rather than having them tech out and return to neutral. Teching out of air combos can happen when the combo drops, they leave you floating in the sky, and is performed by pressing any button when you can tech. A safe way to tech without accidentally getting buttons to come out is pressing back with 2 attacks so that you get Flawless Defense in the air. A strong way to escape corner pressure when you see an opening is not necessarily to press buttons back, but to super jump and then air dash away as a nice passive way to return to neutral. Just be sure to rotate through your options so that your opponent can't get a read on you. 6P is usually the dedicated anti-air button and has upper body invincibility. This allows for it to not only be used as an anti-air, but as a counter poke as well. Whiffing a heavy slash when you're trying to throw sucks, so instead use the option select of forward plus slash and heavy slash. If the opponent is in range, you'll get a throw, and if not, you'll get a close slash. It cuts the risk down and makes going for throws slightly less dangerous. The little to no buffer in these games is what makes them feel so snappy and responsive to your inputs, but can also make things like reversal timing and combos with jump cancels kinda difficult at first, so be sure to practice these. Guilty Gear can often be defined by not getting solid confirms off pokes at a distance, but this is where meter comes into play. Be sure to take the value of meter into consideration. Would you rather get extended damage from a combo that normally knocks down anyway, or would you want to turn your far poke into a full confirm? Learning burst safe points in a combo is pretty important at a high level, and getting a read on when the opponent wants to burst will be helpful in your decision making on offense. Do they like to burst during the first or last combo of the round? Do they like to wake up and burst a lot? Picking up on these habits and recognizing your own will save you the time and embarrassment during matches with your opponent. Backdashes are invincible, so many times, even if you have just a frame of wiggle room, you can attempt to backdash and start your turn. Just be careful, as many offensive structures plan to deal with this and can get blown up. Speaking of invincibility, many moves have low profile or crushing properties that will just outright beat certain attacks. Check and see if any of your character's tools function this way.
You must get in that ass.
Okay, that was a bit of a tangent. My bad. There is a lot more to this game than what I have time to cover with this video. Throw invul moves, attack levels, gold burst, purple Roman cancels, FRC, variable wake up times, weight values, overdrives, instant kills, negative penalty, tension pulse, stun, guts, game specific techniques, Venom 2S, Johnny 5HS, Soul 2D, all of shotgun stance. But you don't really need to know about all that yet. Guilty Gear teaches best through play, and most of what I've mentioned now are just answers to questions you don't even have yet. It's best to play matches, have some stuff happen, figure out why that stuff happened, and then try to understand how to avoid that stuff from happening in the future, or maybe use that stuff yourself. Guilty Gear is a beautiful game that is probably one of the most rewarding feeling fighting games to invest into. You really feel like you learned so much from playing the game, and there are so many intricate player-to-player interactions that'll keep you interested in the game for a long time to come. As far as what game you should play now, Guilty Gear Xrd Rev 2 is the most recent release, and you can find a decent amount of action for that game online, especially if you play on PC. Guilty Gear XX Accent Core Plus R will soon have a full rollback netcode implementation into the Steam version for really solid online matches, so there will definitely be a crowd there as well. I myself have been playing so much of the rollback netcode beta. These games go on sale all the time on Steam and websites like Fanatical, so keep your eye out to get it for cheap if you're interested. And of course, Guilty Gear Strive is set to come out early next year in 2021, and despite some apprehension I have about the game, I have no doubt that it'll still preserve the feeling of Guilty Gear at its core. That'll be it for this video. Be sure to hit me up in the comments or on Twitter if you want to talk about Guilty Gear. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed thus far, comments, likes, everything. It's also appreciated, really. I'll be back with some more fighting game content for you guys really soon. Until then, I'll catch you later. Peace.